watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended. Today is Friday, April 2nd, and my name is Ryan Hulsebos. Thank you for joining us here for our fourth show of GLE, and we have a fairly large show planned. Lacrosse Flash writer Noah Landis will be joining me shortly. You probably know him better as PLL Chirps on Twitter. Noah will be joining me to talk about some of the recent activity going on in the PLL. We saw the Cannons make a handful of additions on Wednesday, including the addition of Super Bowl champion and ex-football player Chris Hogan through the waiver wire. They also traded midfielder Brent Adams and acquired attackman Andrew Q from the Redwoods. What do these moves mean for Coach Quirk's team going forward? We'll try to answer that question. And we'll also touch on the off seasons of the Redwoods, Atlas, Archers, Whipsnakes, and Chrome, and some names that could still be out there for the taking in the PLL player pool. And then Harrison Silcox will be joining me in a little bit as we look ahead to North Carolina Duke on Thursday night. We'll unfortunately be talking about the game before it plays, but we'll give some predictions on how we think that game will go. We'll also look ahead to the weekend in college lacrosse. We've got some Notre Dame, Syracuse action, Ohio State, Rutgers, Game 2 for TD Ierlan with number 5 Denver, and 2 top 20 matchups out of the Patriot League headlining this weekend's slate of games. In Whipsnakes Faceoff specialist, Joe Nardella will be joining me to close out today's show, a 2-time PLL champion and one of the best Faceoff specialists in the game. Make sure to stick around for that. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify, Anchor, and a handful of other podcast platforms. You can follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All of the links, as well as the Lacrosse Flash website and social media accounts, will be down below in the description. Make sure to follow Lacrosse Flash for all the latest news and updates. Mr. Landis, what's going on, my friend? Welcome to Goal Line Extended.
What's up? Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. Hey, Wednesday, very, very busy day in the Premier Lacrosse League. The waiver wire officially opened on Tuesday. The teams announced those moves across social media. It looks like it was done in that kind of a snake style. If you go to the PLL website and go to the transactions, you can see that they got that they go in the order of the college draft with the Cannons with that number 1 selection. So pretty much just another draft as teams submitted their claims. Some teams made more moves than others. The Cannons ended up making 9 additions, while the Chaos 0 additions, as they made a few claims before the entry draft of players already in that player pool. Noah, let's talk about those Cannons. But let's go back to Monday first. Coach Quirk, maybe about an hour or so after completing an interview with me for this show, turned around and sent midfielder Brent Adams to the Atlas in exchange for a 4th-round pick in next year's college draft. We'll talk about how that move benefits the Atlas in a second. But Coach Quirk compiling picks here for the future, and then following the first round of waiver pickups, he acquired attackman Andrew Q from the Redwoods for the 24th overall pick in this year's college draft. That's a 3rd-round pick for a player that Redwoods head coach Nat St. Laurent picked up with the 4th waiver selection. We'll see how the Adams trade plays out for the Cannons when that 4th-round pick is used next season. But Andrew Q, the next attackman, added to a group that also now includes Lyle Thompson, Ryan Drenner, and Bryce Wasserman. Noah, this attack core seems to be coming together pretty nicely now for Coach Quirk. He now adds Q. How do you think he fits in with what Quirk already has put together here in the last month?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit surprising to see it come out on Monday, and we were all expecting the waiver wires to come in this week. I mean, it's hard to say what Quirk is really doing. I tried to take every team and kind of figure out what their game plan was with, each draft and the way they're kind of going about things. It's hard to say that the Cannons are going with a youth movement when you draft Brody Merrill and a couple of the other guys they grabbed, but then you go and you grab an Andrew Q. You've got some of these guys that are a little bit younger, and so I think adding a little bit of youth to the attack line. Lyle is obviously the best player in the world, but the PLL is here to stay, and so I think they're taking that opportunity with this entry draft and with all of the luxury that comes with being a new team in a league, and saying, okay, we've got some horses, we've got some players that we can build off of now, but let's get a few guys that keep us, up and coming in the future too, so that way 3 to 4 years down the road we're not, scraping for some offense and our guys aren't, crawling off the field at the 4th quarter.
Ex-NFL football player Chris Hogan, a Super Bowl champion with the New England Patriots, and a guy that bounced around at wide receiver for a few other teams. Former Penn State lacrosse player, he has now been added by Coach Quirk, and it looks like he will be headed to training camp as a member of the Cannons Lacrosse Club. It kind of overshadows the other moves that they made, so we'll get this out of the way. What does Hogan bring to this Cannons team?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing he brings is attention and clicks. That's kind of the obvious thing that people have to kind of get past with Hogan is, did Rabel do this for picks? You know, did he do this so we can get a little buzz generated? I think it's a little bit of both. I think Hogan is obviously a world-class athlete, and he's proven that. I mean, in the NFL, anybody that can even make a roster in the NFL is going to be top of their class in speed, size, you know, whatever attribute you decide. The big question mark is stick skills. You know, I don't want to compare him to Doc Sakin because it's not even a fair comparison. But we saw Doc's leave for a year, and it's taken him a quarter to a half of a season to kind of get back in his shooting stride. Some of his stick skills, things like that, are just a little bit sloppy. You know, I didn't see enough of Hogan when he was in college to have a fair say on how he was and what he kind of looked like. I think the big thing for him is going to be lacrosse IQ. Can he get back in the mindset of, I'm not just running a route, I'm running an offense, you know? And can he bring the stick skills to match that? Because these defenders are the best in the world. If you're not on your game, protecting your stick at all times, and if you don't have that ball moving at the rate that you need to move in the PLL, things are going to struggle. And we saw that ball movement is a huge deal with the chaos last year. If the ball gets stuck in one person's stick, it can be tough to generate any offense. And I get he's a midfielder. You know, it's going to be a little different. He's going to dodge. He's going to do some transition stuff. But either way, they've got way too many just talented pieces on offense to have the ball in anybody's stick too long. And that's one of the things I could be worried about with him. Great athlete, though.
Oh, absolutely a great athlete. Probably one of the best athletes now in the game. Always open, as he likes to say. We'll see if that carries over here to lacrosse. The Cannons made 8 other additions: attackman Bryce Wasserman, John Upgren, and Shane Jackson. Wasserman and Upgren, both former Boston Cannons. Midfielder Luke Anderson, LSM Chase Levesque, a former college teammate of Reese Eddy, and defenseman Justin Pugel, Scott Hooper, and Holden Garland. Pugel and Hooper, former Cannons as well. They now sit at 30 players, which is now that magic number. And we recently learned as well that defenseman Curtis Corley won't be available this season. So let's start with the defense. What do the additions of Levesque, Pugel, Hooper, and Garland add to this defense that might look a little bit like the 2020 Boston Cannons defense, or one of old, with Pugel, Hooper, Merrill, Morocco, and now 6th overall entry draft selection Zach Goodrich down there?
Yeah, I mean, with defense, I think one of the biggest things is continuity. And I think Coach Cork is being very smart and calculated by bringing in some of the guys that he knows and some of the guys that know him. You know, I think he goes back to kind of using the draft to get some guys that you would take a chance on and you think you could build a team around in the future, but also some guys that you know are going to make sure you're not last in the league this first year, you know. So I think he's done a good job of balancing that, you know, obviously with the guys he's added that have been on his team before, as well as some of those guys that he doesn't have as much experience with. They're obviously proven players. So it'll be interesting to see how training camp plays out, because there's going to be a lot of back and forth. And I guarantee that everyone who predicts a starting lineup on the first weekend of the PLL season is probably going to get the defense wrong, and is probably going to get a lot of the midfield wrong too, just because there's so much to switch out and interchange. You know, I mean, it's really just gambler's luck to find that starting defense. I mean, the only one that could be really a lock would be Brody Merrill, just because you're not going to draft Brody Merrill and then stick him on the bench unless, I mean, I don't know Brody Merrill, but I don't think he would like that very much either. So I think he's probably a lock, and I think some other guys could make an argument, but honestly, that one's kind of a toss-up to me. I think we're going to know a lot more after training camp, and I think a lot of these training camp vlogs that they're going to do are going to tell us a lot, because we're going to see a lot of, you know, how this plays out. So I'm really excited to see that.
You talk about it being difficult to predict the defense, the midfield for this Cannons team. Let's talk about the attack. Wasserman was the 2020 MLL MVP. He went undrafted in the entry draft, and Coach Quirk able to grab him back and keep him in a Cannons jersey going into 2021, along with the additions of Upgren, Jackson. You know, you got the other attackmen on the roster, Ryan Drenner, Lyle Thompson. What do you think an opening day attack looks like for this Cannons team?
I think it goes one of two ways. Either it goes with continuity, and you see, you know, obviously Lyle's your centerpiece, and you're going to want to build around him. I know he and Shane Jackson have some continuity from the NLL. They've played together in Georgia. So Shane Jackson has a really good chance to earn a spot on this team if he can kind of create and work with him on this. Bryce Wasserman is proven that he can pretty much play with anybody. I mean, he was the MVP of the league. So, you know, when you're looking at a sheet of players, you're like, all right, I got a former MVP. I got the best player in the world. Those are probably our two guys we're going to build around. After that, let's see who works with them best, right? Let's see who's going to complement those two guys, because you don't need another, you don't need another lead singer. You need someone who's going to play off ball. You need someone who's going to make cuts. You need someone who's going to set some picks. And, that could be a toss-up because a lot of those guys are really good at that. Drenner, he's played in so many different spots now. He started with the Whips. He went to the Water Dogs, and he's found pretty good success at both places. So I could see him making the adjustments needed to find. He just grinds. He finds a way to make the starting lineup and be successful. So I could see him being a little, addition piece on that third attack spot. But yeah, I think you're going to be looking for the guy that's going to, help Bryce Wasserman and Lyle Thompson get open, score goals, and take some pressure off them. Because if that's not your game plan, then why'd you draft them?
We will see how this Cannons attack comes together. Moving on to the Redwoods, they landed another goalie with Jack Kelly's future in question. They picked up former Chesapeake Bayhawks goalie Brian Phipps, as well as a third-round draft pick in this year's college draft. In the trade, that sent Andrew Q to the Cannons. Very smart move by Coach St. Laurent, taking Q with what looks to be the fourth waiver pick in St. Laurent, who moved a few draft picks around in acquiring Rob Pennell. He only had 2 selections in the entry draft. He's able to get a mid-draft pick. With the futures of Kelly and Matt Landis in question, Landis being on that military list, how big is this addition of Phipps, and could he challenge Troutner for that starting job?
I think he really could. Troutner was, in 2019, arguably the best goalie in the league. There were a lot of guys that made that argument, but he came onto the scene and never really missed a beat. The bubble he was still decent. He was good, but he didn't bring that, this guy is unbeatable, type of feel to the game. And when you bring in a guy like Brian Phipps, who, he's Brian Phipps, everybody knows his name, his resume, what he's done. I would be hard pressed to think that, this is a competitive league. If you're not contributing now, it's going to be tough for you. So I think there could definitely be some, challenge there. I think Troutner is obviously going to have the starting job to lose just because he's got that experience in the PLL. But the way the season goes, it's a longer season. We're not in a bubble anymore. We're playing week to week. Anything could happen. And when you have one proven goalie and your others are good goalies, but they needed that extra guy for padding that, if something happens to Troutner, he could get hurt. He could get COVID, God forbid, that we're having to deal with that this season. But, having that little bit of padding there on the defense to bring in a guy that you have confidence in immediately, which I think is what Brian Phipps is, that's a really good move. And I think it's one that they needed.
Definitely a great addition by Coach St. Laurent. We'll see what else he can do here as we move along through the offseason. The Atlas, they had 3 players in the waiver wire in LSM Kyle, plus a former Denver Outlaw, goalie J.D. Colarusso, and attackman Mark Cockerton. Cockerton played for Rubier with the Boston Cannons, press with Michael Rexroad and Andrew Newbold with the Outlaws. Which of these pickups do you like the best as the Atlas continue this offensive retool? This offseason retool, I should say.
Right. Cockerton is one of those guys that we were all a little bit when he didn't get drafted, we were like, okay, I guess that's the way it's going to go. We're going to have guys that we think should have obviously been drafted that have been around for a while that aren't going to make it. And we all expected him to kind of get picked up somewhere. I like that he's on the Atlas. The Atlas are going to have presumably Michael Sowers coming in as well when the college draft rolls around. And I think he's another one of those attackmen that can bring some of that veteran leadership. He can bring some, offensive coach on the field type feeling to an Atlas squad that is almost brand new on offense now. They've got so many new pieces in the midfield and even in the attack. They basically took their game plan last year, crumbled it up, and threw it in the trash, and now they're going to go with a whole new offense. And so when you have that, you're going to need some guys who can calm the game down, calm the ball down. They know what they're doing. They've been doing this. They've been in several different offenses. Cockerton's probably been in every offense that's ever been created. So, bringing in a guy like that can help usher some of these younger guys in and get some continuity, I think, is a big deal for Atlas.
Brent Adams for a 4th-round pick in next year's college draft. Seems like an absolute steal if you ask me. What does Adams bring to the table in terms of this Atlas offense and into the transition game?
Yeah, the name of the game in the PLL is speed, and that's what you're getting in Brent Adams. We saw it with the Redwoods. I almost wish they would have used him a little bit more. I think they liked to slow the game down a little bit and use some of their horses at the midfield to dodge from a set offense, in Jones and Perkovic. So I think being on a team that encourages transition, encourages not really making those subs from offense to defense, I think Brent Adams can really benefit from that. And I think we're going to really see, what he can be as an offensive starter in a league that is like the PLL with a shorter field, because he's going to bring several shots a game. And we've been waiting for a while just for that breakout kind of. There's Brent Adams, and he's made some incredible goals, and he's scored some big goals in some big games. So now I'm really excited to see him in a team that he can grow with an entire season, and he's a big part of that offense the entire season, where he gets comfortable and he starts kind of making those moves and learning what it is to be that leading offensive role in the midfield.
In last year's entry draft, the Whipsnakes made out like bandits by selecting 2020 MVP Zed Williams with the 5th overall selection. And it seems like head coach Jim Stagnita is doing something very similar this time around in 2021. Attackman Chris Islanian, defensive midi Charlie Hayes, and midfielder Brian Cole added in the entry draft, and 4-time champ Matt Abbott, the human clear, LSM Alex Spring, and faceoff specialist Kevin Reisman picked up in the waiver wire. Loading back up here for 2021. Which of these moves do you like the best?
Oh, gosh. You mentioned, first of all, you're starting at the top. So all of this is just like house money. You're getting better wherever you want to. Matt Abbott, I think, is a really good addition. I know the Whipsnakes last year, I'm not even going to say that their offense stalled at times in 6-on-6, because it didn't for very long. I mean, when you've got the guys that they've got, but sometimes you saw it get wonky and out of focus for a few minutes in a quarter. And with these short games, that can mean a lot. So I think adding some of that transition, adding some extra clears. I mean, Matt Abbott's good, like you said, for any clear he wants. I think you're really just adding solid guys that can get you more possessions. And Chris Aslanian, he's going to fill some of those roles at the attack. Again, if somebody gets hurt, you're pulling in a guy with experience. It's just another one of those teams that I don't even know what you say about the Whipsnakes at this point, because they're the team to beat. I mean, they really are.
The Archers, they bulked up in this draft. Head coach Chris Bates said he wanted to get bigger and stronger, and he did just that. Defenseman Graham Hossack taken with the 2nd overall pick. Warren Jeffrey taken in the 3rd round. Another bruiser down low to pair with Eli Gobrecht and Matt McMahon on that defense. Midfielder Ryan McNamara was taken in the 2nd round, and claimed in the waivers was goalie Nick Washuta, now making 3 goalies on the roster. Attackman Nate Solomon and Lacrosse Flash favorite Latrell Harris, a defensive midfielder from the Toronto Rock. This defense now looks very scary on paper. Where do they stack up among the league's other top units, and how do you think Bates deploys this unit?
Yeah, I mean, this was the team that I was the most excited about after all this happened, because when you step back and take a look at a team who the focal point of their identity has been that you've got the best midfielder in the world, and you've got 3 of the most cohesive athletic attackmen in the world, everybody thinks at Archers, and they think they're going to score the ball. And that defense, while it was pretty good, it wasn't ever a real bad defense, kind of got left in, the background and wasn't talked about a lot. And I think that may be what, has kind of cost them those chances in those big games that they get, close semifinals, they get in the bubble. But bringing in a Latrell Harris, bringing in a Graham Hossack, these guys that are certified big-bodied dudes that are going to match up with the best athletes in the world. I think that's huge, because now you don't have to worry about that defense being gassed. You don't have to worry about that defense being a weak spot. If it was, it certainly wasn't the best defense in the league, but it wasn't the worst either. So I think they took the steps they needed to address the spots that they needed to fill, and they did it perfectly with Hossack, with Latrell. I mean, I read up a little bit on his story just because he's one of the funnest guys in the NLL. I mean, it's just crazy, a guy right out of high school getting signed. So that's going to be a fun story, just watching him grow and see how he performs. And then Nate Solomon, he comes in the midfield. He's a Syracuse guy. He's got, some experience. I think he's athletic enough, and I think he's good enough with his stick skills to play in any league, in any game. So we'll see what happens there. He could definitely earn some time. And then the goalie situation, we run all 3 of those by me real quick so we can talk about all 3 of them.
Adam Gittleman, Drew Adams, and then they just added, let's see if I can get it, Nick Washuta.
Nick Washuta, right. They were already doing the split time, I believe, with Gittleman and Adams. So you wonder if they're going to kind of go away from that. That was never really, I think, because one was doing better than the other. I think they liked the idea of having 2 goalies and kind of throwing off the shooting presence on the other team, at halftime if they're getting too comfortable. So it'll be interesting. I don't know a whole lot about Washuta, I'll be honest with you. I know, Gittleman and Adams are going to be hard pressed to lose any time in that cage. So I could see there being a little bit of a battle, but at the same time, I don't think the Archers are going to have to worry about too much with both of those legends in cage.
We will see how that goalie battle shapes out, and who probably, I would imagine, 2 guys making that 30-man roster, but there could be 3. We'll see how that all plays out. The Archers also released on Wednesday LSM Mike Simon and attackman Davey Amala, freeing up some space as we continue through the waiver period and towards the college draft. Chrome added another former Rochester Rattler and attackman Randy Stotts. He will now join Jordan Wolf and Justin Gutterding down on that Chrome attack. Coach Tim Sudan also grabbed goalie Sean Scanone and midfielder Colin Heacock in the entry draft. And in the waivers, he added defenseman Greg Well and defensive midfielder Ryan Bevel. Coach Sudan talked before the draft of trying to find the heir apparent to John Galloway. And it seems like he has done that with the drafting of Scanone.
Yeah, he was kind of the people's favorite coming out of the NLL, the MLL. He was the guy that everybody was watching last year. Everybody loves him because he's a big presence in the cage, and he seems like he's got a pretty fun personality. And I think he fits the Chrome pretty well because the Chrome are this team that thrive on energy. They thrive on momentum, and they've added the offensive pieces to keep that momentum and keep that energy with Stotts and Heacock. But on the defensive side of the ball, now you've got – and don't get me wrong, Galloway brings a lot of energy. He always has. But I think just having another face in there and another body to lift those spirits if things get down, he fits the bill, and I think they're going to really benefit from not only his skills as a goalie, because he's one of the best goalies that came over from the I did it again, Jesus, the MLL. But he's also brings that Chrome factor where I think he's going to mesh well with a lot of those guys, which is huge for that team.
Noah, I want to thank you for talking shop with me here on today's show. The PLO offseason rolls on. We'll wait and see if we get any more moves, as the college draft has been pushed back a few weeks. April 26th, the new date. Make sure to follow Lacrosse Flash for all the latest news as these 8 PLO teams continue to round out their rosters. 30 is the maximum for training camp. Noah, thank you again, my man. Harrison Silcox will be joining me next. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
Welcome back to Goal Line Extended, Friday, April 2nd. I hope you're all having a great day and enjoying the show. Noah Lands and I just wrapped up a conversation about the PLO following the entry draft last week and the recent waiver wire additions made earlier this week, and we'll continue tracking those as these head coaches fill out their rosters before the college draft. But joining me now to look ahead to another weekend in college lacrosse, Lacrosse Flash contributor Harrison Silcox. Harrison, welcome to Goal Line Extended. How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. First episode, ready to roll. We got a great lineup of games this week, so I'm pumped. I'm glad I'm here for this one.
Oh yeah, we have a fantastic lineup of games, but I want to start with the big story that we had on Wednesday. We learned from the University of Albany that attackman Hogan would no longer be a part of the Great Danes lacrosse program. The move following rumors that he had been yelling at teammates and coaches on the sideline during Albany's loss to Stony Brook this past weekend, a game in which he scored 4 goals and an assist. He was also one of 3 Great Danes to miss the game against UMass following an on-the-field altercation in Albany's game with Binghamton. Harrison, Tahoka is one of the top players in college lacrosse when he's healthy and at his best. 15 goals and 8 assists on the year, and he will presumably finish his college career with 109 goals and 61 assists. He says he will complete classes at Albany. But from the lacrosse perspective, how does this affect Albany's chances at possible America East title, and then in that NCAA championship bid, losing one of their staples on offense? Does this hurt Tahoka's chances of getting drafted in April, as that seems like his next step would be the PLO draft?
Yeah, it's a really curious kind of story here. I mean, because you wonder what the locker room impact of this is. If a guy like Hogan Nanticoke, if those locker room issues were true and the kind of the rumors that we're hearing, obviously I hope the best for the guy as far as where he goes from here. Hope he graduates, gets his degree and all that stuff. But for Albany, I think they're in good hands. We saw Tahoga miss time this season. You mentioned multiple players were suspended earlier because of an on-the-field altercation, and they seem to handle it. I think Coach Marr still got his his core group in that locker room that he likes. So as far as Albany goes, I mean, they're still in a competitive conference in the America East, and a loss this weekend to Stony Brook definitely didn't help. But if there were locker room issues and this is part of solving them, then that's just kind of the case here. So as far as things go for Coach Marr in Albany, I'm not too worried about them. It sounds like this is kind of something that was building up, and then this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And then for Tehoka and his future and professional lacrosse, I'm really curious from PLL wise, just seeing some of the guys on MLL rosters who didn't get picked up in the waiver wire yet or didn't get drafted last week. I'm curious to see how our coach is going to view that, because I think coaches are kind of picky of the guys they bring in their locker room. And the most common thing with every pick was, this guy is going to be a great fit in our locker room. Everything that we're hearing and the rumors swirling around why this happened internally with Hogan no longer being with the team doesn't sound like a great locker room presence that a coach is going to want to add to their team in the PLL. So I'm curious what that means for him and his draft stock, because obviously huge talent, number one recruit coming in 2017. Unfortunate that it winds up going the direction that it has, and I think it's really going to hurt him come time for that college draft.
We'll see if that does, in fact, end up hurting him. And Albany, they'll be hosting UMass Lowell this weekend, trying to get back into that conversation for one of those top 20 spots. Might be a little difficult here after losing to Hogan Nanticoke, but we will see. Now, the game to watch last night, the battle of the top two teams in college lacrosse, North Carolina and Duke. Now, we are recording this segment about an hour before the game on Thursday, so unfortunately, we won't have reactions to the outcome, but let's give some predictions, and we'll see tomorrow if these predictions hold true. Harrison, give me a score prediction, who wins, and over-under on Michael Sowers and Chris Gray combined points, and what matchup are you most looking forward to? Because we get big games like this. There are some of the best college lacrosse players, some of the best lacrosse players going head-to-head here. Who are you looking forward to seeing go at it?
I'm really excited to see Michael Sowers and Will Bowen. We've seen Bowen go against some big guys like Asher Nolting at a high point, hold his ground, and he's a really good defender. And I'm excited to see how his career develops down the line. But Michael Sowers is shifty, quick, and it's going to be a really unique matchup to see how he handles that. And obviously the counter argument there as well, he guards Chris Gray every day in practice, who's also really fast. So that's a matchup I'm really excited to see. I hope we're going to see JT Giles Harris on Chris Gray on the other end. So the two ex-attackmen for these teams, I'm really excited to see how they match up with two really good defenders right now. Probably the two best. You could argue the two best defenders in the ACC. And over-under, I'm going to say set the over-under at like 10 points combined between these guys. I would hit the over on that. I think they're going to combine for 12 maybe. Just knowing how North Carolina initiates their offense through Chris Gray and then the potential of Michael Sowers. My final score prediction, I like North Carolina in this game just because the rankings just flipped. Duke just went back ahead. And I think North Carolina kind of feels like Duke might still be getting talked about a little bit too much as far as the national media is concerned. So I like North Carolina edging out like a high score, like 17-15 or something right around that range. So that's my prediction.
We are hoping for a very high-scoring game. Definitely want to see a lot of points out of Sowers and Gray. You bring up though, I really college football playoff. You wouldn't see these teams flip-flop there 1 and 2. It was really interesting to see that happens on the Inside Lacrosse is what I'm referring to, at least their polls. Yeah. It was interesting to see them flip-flop and then flip-flop back. I thought once North Carolina at least went up to 1, it was going to take a loss or especially a loss to Duke in order for that to flip back. Duke ended up taking that top spot back, and we'll see, because tonight we're going to know after tonight's game, or after we should say last night's game, who that number one will be. North Carolina and Duke. Again, at the time that this show will be out, that game will be over. We will talk much more about the outcome and the results on Tuesday's show. Let's move on to the other ACC matchup going on this weekend. Tomorrow, Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish will head to upstate New York to take on the Syracuse Orange, a battle of the two more top 10 teams, I should say. What are you looking forward to in this one, and which team comes out on top?
I'm just looking forward to, I'm still excited about ACC lacrosse being back. I'm really interested in this game and how Notre Dame responds, losing a game that you could argue they should have won. Liam Entenmann, right on the doorstep. You don't get opportunities like that as a goalie. And that really came back to haunt him at the end of that game as Doc's on the other end hit that corner. So I'm interested to see how Notre Dame responds after that. That was a tough way to lose a game. And then how does Syracuse respond to losing to Duke, right? I mean, it's kind of a tough situation for Notre Dame because they face a Virginia team who starts 0-2 in the ACC, so they really need a win. Now they're going against Syracuse, who probably thinks that they should have beat Duke. So they're looking at this like, well, we want to get one back because they don't want to go 0-2 in the ACC. So it's a big game here as far as the standings are concerned. The Notre Dame defense and how they match up against the versatile Syracuse offense, where it seems like they just seem to become more versatile each game they play. Scanlon's really gotten into a nice groove. I believe he's got like 11 goals in his last 2 games or something like that. And Owen Hiltz has just been ridiculous as a freshman this season. And then obviously midfield and the guys who've been there for a while, Brendan Curry, Stephen Rafis, initiating from behind, the way their midfielders can invert. So how do the short stick defensive middies match up? How does that defense as a unit handle one of the most versatile offense that they faced so far this season? So those are the things I'm really looking forward to watching in this game. The area of concern for me for Notre Dame is that offense. Too many inconsistencies over the last few years for Kevin Corrigan. And I really like a lot of the pieces on their offense. But sometimes it just kind of stalls out. You don't really see them start to initiate until late in the shot clock. They take their time substituting before they want to get moving. And it just doesn't always work. And so they need to find a way to just put 4 quarters together. That's something that was also missing in that Virginia game. So they'll need to do that. And then the face-off battle is going to be interesting to watch. Kyle Gallagher's been really good this year. We didn't see a whole lot of Charlie Leonard in that game on Saturday. We'll see how that duo gets worked out between Kevin Corrigan. But it should be a fun one up there in the Dome. I think Syracuse is going to edge it out, though.
Yeah, as you said, both teams coming off tough ACC losses, Syracuse to Duke and Notre Dame to Virginia. So we want to see ACC Gauntlet, as you said, very, very fun. One of those teams in the ACC that won't be competing in the ACC Gauntlet per se is Virginia. Number 17 ranked Richmond will play Virginia on Saturday at 5 p.m. Another good test here for UVA, as like I said, they get a week off from ACC play. What are you looking forward to in this one?
Just kind of see how Virginia responds after they finally get that ACC win. And Richmond isn't necessarily an easy draw by any means. And some people might look at Richmond and think like, okay, it's not in the major, it's not ACC or Big Ten. But this is a team that can be difficult to match up at times, just with the prospects they have and the style that they play offensively. So how does Virginia's defense handle that? Because at times they've let teams go on runs this season. They've kind of lost their man off ball and things like that. So I don't want to call it like a trap game. I think that's kind of a strong way to put it. But Richmond's definitely not an opponent that you can overlook. I mean, some years they will sneak in there and upset a team like a Duke. So we have, we've seen that stuff before where Richmond's come in, upset an ACC team or something like that. So how does Virginia handle that? A game that they barely won, and Doc Aiken really came out and showed why he's one of the better midfielders in the country. So how do they go from that game on the road? They're going to play Richmond. So I'm interested just to see how they come out and if they put their foot on the gas pedal, different things like that, or if Richmond's going to hang with them.
Richmond has proved tough to a few of these teams, especially a few of these ACC teams over the last couple of years. And, I mean, they're going for either win their conference or one of those at-large bids. So Richmond absolutely a ranked team trying to stay in the conversation. We have a trio of Big Ten action, as always, here in 2021. Maryland hosts Penn State, and Johns Hopkins will host Michigan. But the game to watch this weekend looks to be Ohio State and Rutgers, the 16th-ranked Buckeyes, heading to New Jersey to take on the 8th-ranked Scarlet Knights. Joe Nardella will be joining me next to talk a little bit more about this game. But Harrison, Ohio State and Rutgers, this could be a statement game for both teams. Rutgers to prove that they are still the second-best team in the Big, and for Ohio State to prove that they should be in that conversation. How do you see this game playing out, and who comes out on top?
Yeah, it definitely is a big game, especially with the Big Ten being only that Big Ten schedule. This is going to be the second time these teams play each other, and so you wonder about who's going to make it into the tournament. How many Big Ten teams are going to get into the tournament? And Rutgers, after that hot start, got a lot of people watching. Then they had to play Maryland twice in 3 games, and that's never fun. And you watch them live. So they're 1-2 in their last 3 games because of that. And then for Ohio State at 3-3, the last time they played Rutgers, it didn't go well for Ohio State. It was 22-12. Rutgers ran away with that game. So how does Ohio State make adjustments? If you were able to watch that game on the terrible stream that it was, if anybody remembers that, where you're watching from a blimp, it felt like Ohio State, their defense is getting crushed in early offense. Rutgers was pedal to the metal from the get-go that game, and they put up a 20-piece on the Buckeyes. So how does that defense respond? How do they make adjustments? You imagine that they could scout it a little bit better, but still, guys like Hurst and Charlon Beatties have just been playing so good for Rutgers that I still think this is a really good team, and I really like them in this matchup. People are just kind of maybe sleeping on them a little bit because you played Maryland, who's the number 3 team in the country. You could argue they're the number 1 team in the country twice in your last 3 games. And I mean, that's a gauntlet in and of itself. And the one thing I wonder for Ohio State is, when's Ryan Terefenko going to be back? Because we know that they have all these good pieces. I don't know the full extent of whatever he's going through right now, health-wise, but he is such a key cog in that defense and offense. And I mean, he was even taking faceoffs at the beginning of the season. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the country. I think he's a huge piece to get the wheel turning for Ohio State. And they're really going to want him in a game like this against Rutgers. So I wonder, is he going to be healthy? And if not, I think it's going to be a long day for the Buckeyes.
We will see how that one goes. Rutgers and Ohio State, really the one headlining those Big Ten matchups. TD Ierlan will also be making his second start of the season for the Denver Pioneers as they host Marquette on Saturday. There's currently no time listed for the game. We will hope that that game plays. But Harrison, 14 for 14 last weekend. What should we expect from Mr. TD in that 1-2 punch with Alex Stathakis this weekend in his second start of the season?
I need to call Coach Tierney, and I need to tell him out of respect. This is no disrespect to Coach Tierney. He's one of the greatest coaches ever. He's arguably the greatest. Don't play TD Ierlan, because I don't want a year from now to be having this rules discussion again about how to fix the faceoff, because there's nothing wrong with the faceoff. TD is just that good of a player. So stop playing him. Just, sprinkle him in every few games. You have Stathakis. You have a good faceoff guy. Just stop putting TD in every game, or else he's going to go 14 of 14 at the X. And Marquette is not a great faceoff. They're 32% as a team on faceoffs. So this is another matchup where you expect TD's just going to feast here. So that's my concern, is I'm thinking about the next time the rules committee is going to meet and everybody's going to wonder how they're going to change the faceoff, because I don't want it to change. I'm fine with SNG. I like it gets the wings more involved, but TD Ierlan's too athletic where whatever faceoff rules you make, it's not going to matter. The guy's going to go and have a 14 for 14 every once in a while, or even better than that, which is hard to imagine. I mean, so I know these two teams played earlier in the season and it was close. I believe it was 10-9, narrow victory for Denver. But Marquette 1-5. I mean, you only get so many chances to upset a team like that. And I don't see this one being as close. Denver's really, I mean, they've been scoring almost 20 goals per game since that game against Marquette. And this offense is really clicking. And Tierney's got himself a really good team. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him this point in the year. I know it sounds kind of cliche to say, but with TD now finally there, and then to also have Stathakis to counter if TD's ever having an off day, if those exist. I really like this team that Tierney has. I like the offense he's built. I like the short stick D-middies he has. And, I mean, we all remember how good his teams were when he had Trevor Baptiste running things at the faceoff X. So I really like Denver in this matchup. I think they're going to go up to 8-2, and I think they're going to flirt with 20 goals, if not get there.
Denver back up to number 5 in the country, hoping to maybe make some more strides here as we're going into April here. One more month of regular season play and then into those conference championships. Denver trying to cement their spot, at least for an at-large bid as they get into that tournament. We have a few headlining games out of the ACC and Big Ten, but the Patriot League is also giving us a treat with 2 top 10 matchups. Number 7 Army heads to Lehigh, and Navy will host Loyola on Saturday, 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. start times, respectively. It looks like one of these teams should win the Patriot League, and the hope will be that one of them could be up for one of those at-large bids. We'll find out much more about that, about how that could shape up this weekend with these matchups. But Harrison, prior to this weekend's games, who do you like as that number 1 and possibly number 2 team out of the Patriot League this season?
I really like Army. I feel like we're just not talking about them enough, and they've just been hanging around in the top 10 all season. I just think this is a team that, they play hard. They go after ground balls. They're going to give you everything they've got every single game. That's just how Army lacrosse has been coached since since the dawn of time. And so I like them. I think the way that they play the game, they're also a very physical team, and the discipline that they play with, I like them to come out of the Patriot League as that one team. And then I know Loyola's coming off, an upset overtime. They didn't play well against Towson, but we've seen Loyola at their worst. We've also seen them at their best. So they're going to compete in that league as well. But I just really like what Army's been able to bring to the table this season. And I know I can go way back to the beginning of the season, February lacrosse, whatever, in that Syracuse game. But that tells you a little bit about what Army can do. And I just don't see Loyola getting to a point where they can, at least this season, compete with a heavy hitter in the ACC. I mean, Syracuse was picked to win that conference this year, and Army kept up with them in every sense of the way. So I really like Army, the Patriot League this year. It's not set in stone, but that's a team that I look forward to watching in the tournament.
Army is looking really good thus far this season. Loyola, 6 goals or 7 goals last week, 24 the week before against Bucknell. So we'll see if Loyola can get back up to form, we should say, trying to close it out here for the regular season. Some other big games to keep on your radar. Number 10, Georgetown will head to St. John's, and number 19, UMass, fresh off a win Tuesday over number 15, Hofstra, will travel to Drexel. Some games there to keep on your mind as we head into the weekend. Harrison, I want to thank you so much for hopping on the show with me and talking some college lacrosse. Coming up next, Whipsnakes Faceoff specialist Joe Nardella. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the show, Friday, April 2nd. My name is Ryan Hulsebos, and you are watching or listening to our 4th show of Goal Line Extended, a new show out of the Lacrosse Flash podcast network. We are glad that you're here and hopefully enjoying the show as we are now in the middle of week 2 of production. Things are going great, and we're hoping to keep this train moving because it's moving in the right direction right now. And this show is moving in the right direction because joining us now is a 2-time PLL champion for the Whipsnakes Lacrosse Club, the recipient of the 2020 Faceoff Specialist of the PLL Championship Series, and a member of that 2020 Championship Series tournament team, as well as a finalist for the 2020 MVP. He was also a first-team All-Big Ten selection and a Big Ten Specialist of the Year during his time at Rutgers, as well as one of the newest members of the NLL New Albany franchise that has moved from New England. Joining us now, not the one and not the only, because my dad actually knows another guy named Joe Nardella. Guy just goes by Joey. But joining us now, Whipsnakes Faceoff Specialist Joe Nardella. Joe, what's going on, my man?
Ryan, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on the show today. Looking forward to talking shop with you guys and seeing what the conversation brings.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, I want to start with Rutgers because the plan was to have you on the show last week before that game with Maryland, because I wanted to give you sort of like a chance and a platform to speak your mind about it, because I listened to the post game and they were giving you a hard time. They really didn't let you speak your mind there. So being a Jersey guy, really by default, a Rutgers backer, especially when they're good, I wanted to make sure I gave you that chance. Obviously, did not go as hoped. The game, the outcome, we ran into that timing conflict. So we pushed the interview back to today. But you guys had an early lead. All was looking pretty good. And then that run the Terps had there at the end of the first, into the second quarter, seemed to really just take the wind out of the sails. A few failed clears there in the second. But you look at this game, second time around against Maryland, and this one was absolutely better than that last one. 4-2 on the season. Your last 4 games of the regular season against those 4 teams that they took care of fairly easily earlier in the season: Ohio State, Penn State, Johns Hopkins, and Michigan. But looking at it now with the schedule ahead before the Big Ten tournament, now it's a second time seeing Maryland. They'll run into them again at some point down the line. How far do you think this Rutgers team can really go?
I have them as my sleeper team for the Final Four, and thanks for not having me on last week because you saved me the embarrassment of going on air and saying that Rutgers is going to beat Maryland twice in a row. I do think Maryland is a team that's going to be in the Final Four. I think the Big Ten has a ton of great athletes, and Maryland's really battle tested. They're super deep, and they just keep coming at you with consistency and execution all game. So although Rutgers didn't pull this one out, I think 11-9 in the fourth quarter, they get a man-up opportunity. It seems almost like they're going to push to tie the game, but then Maryland does what they do best and just kind of stay steady, hold it down, force Rutgers into a few bad plays, and they come out on top. Definitely a better showing than game one. I do think going into these last four games, Rutgers needs to take those two losses from Maryland and learn and build on both those experiences, right? That's the team they're chasing. That's the team they're after. But you can't get complacent with any of these four teams because as we've seen the Big Ten do in this first half, everybody's beating themselves up or beating each other up, really. Rutgers almost lost to Penn State. That was a tie game in the fourth quarter. Johns Hopkins as well, tie game going into the fourth quarter. None of these games should be taken lightly. I think Ohio State's been much better than they played on the day they played Rutgers, and Michigan beat Penn State, who looked the best they've looked all season last weekend. So none of these games are going to be easy. And I think if Rutgers wants to make the NCAA tournament and kind of make that run and be that sleeper Final Four team, myself, all my former teammates, the rest of Rutgers alumni base hopes they can be, they need to win at least 3 out of these 4 games. I think if they drop 1 or 2, they're in trouble for missing an at-large bid yet again because the field is going to be so tight this year.
Absolutely. And we talk about really the schedule for the Big Ten teams. They're all playing each other right now. It's pretty much a Big Ten tournament for the entire season. And then obviously once we get into May, we're going to have that Big Ten tournament. But yeah, you're going to be seeing Maryland again. You're probably going to be seeing Ohio State again. If you're the number 2 team, you're going to be seeing either Penn State or Johns Hopkins, Michigan. Yeah. You'll see one of them again, and obviously you'll see them here in the regular season. We know that Connor Kirst, what he brings to the table, being regarded right now as one of the top midfielders in this year's college class. You think about the rest of the team. Who's a guy that you could see thrive in the PLL, whether it be the short and field, the shot clock, the faceoff rules, a guy on Rutgers that you see as a guy that could play well on this stage other than Connor Kirst?
I think, both their other attackmen, Adam Charlambides and Kieran Mullins, are like great veteran players, super slick lefties that can play really anywhere you ask them to. Within an offense, they're no ego team first guys. And I think you see that's why you see a ton of chemistry with that attack unit. And I have so much fun watching those boys and grown pretty close with Kieran and Adam over the years. Adam actually started his first year when I was a senior. So he's like the last one from the teams that I was on, still a part of the program. I think outside of those two, I look at a guy like Garrett Bullitt, who's kind of been an anchor on their defense for 4 years now. Like he could be a sleeper play in pro lacrosse, and similar to guys like Kyle Pless and Michael Rexroad, who have played, and Rexroad just got drafted to play on Atlas this summer. Like he's one of those guys who plays with an edge, is super disciplined in everything he does, and I really like his game a lot.
The 2021 college lacrosse season rolling along. Rutgers, despite that second loss to Maryland, staying up there at the top and should be able to remain there as we near conference tournaments and the NCAA championship. Again, that Big Ten schedule going to be a factor, as you're saying. They got to get these games. They cannot drop 1 or 2 of them, at the most 1. But we want to make sure, we want to hope that they can get all 4 of these. Let's talk about the NLL briefly. As I said earlier, you are now a member of the new Albany franchise for the NLL after relocating from New England. As an upstate New York guy yourself, how excited are you to be playing for that hometown team? That's a dream for a lot of kids growing up, me being one of them. And it's looking like in a few months you'll be living out that dream. How excited are you about that?
And yeah, I think, you and I were talking before the show. It's the first time since high school I'm going to play home games in the state of New York, which is pretty cool. And it's only 2.5 hours from where I grew up. So hoping to get a ton of hometown support here and there. When we get to play in Albany, I'm super excited about the opportunity. It's not much further of a drive for me from Boston. It's about an extra 40 minutes past where Mohegan Sun was. So not too big of a change up. Excited for a little bit of a new adventure and change of scenery. And I think Albany's going to be really good to us, being that we're going to be the only professional sports team in town.
Oh yeah, hopefully a lot of engagement there around the sport, around the franchise.
Certainly, when I used to coach college lacrosse at Harvard, we played a Wednesday night game at Albany with like 3,500 fans. And I was like, holy shit, this is like the craziest weeknight game I've seen in a long time. Right. So I do think because of the University of Albany's success, because of like how transcendent the Thompsons were with their run when they were there and how good of a job like Coach Scott Marr and all his assistants have done building that program over the last 10 decades and recruiting a ton of kids from upstate New York, they've gained that sense of community around that team. And I'm hoping that we can do a lot of the same things.
Absolutely. Just creating that huge fan base around the sport. That's what we're trying to do, trying to grow the game, trying to get it in front of more eyeballs. And that's how, just in general, we bring the game and we grow the game, bring forward.
Yeah.
The 2020 season, PLL season, was not what really any of us expected it to be, obviously, probably looking at it at this point last year. But what a lot of people did expect going into it was that you guys, the Whipsnakes, were probably going to keep dominating there in year two, and you did just that. Didn't lose a game in the entire tournament, and you guys haven't lost in over a year and a half. That's even more mind-blowing to say out loud than to just think about. But you're now a two-time PLL champion. Last year had fans. This one didn't. You played really well in 2019, a finalist for that Faceoff Specialist of the Year, but you absolutely dominated this past summer in Utah. Of those two championships, which one was sweeter, and what's the plan right now to get back there? Coach Stagnita doing a pretty stellar job thus far here in the draft and the waiver wire. What's the plan to get this team back to championship weekend?
Yeah, Coach Staggs is not only my guy, he's everybody's guy. We took like everybody entrusts in him, Coach Murphy and Coach Grady's decisions. We think they've done a great job addressing some of the needs we lost to retirement. Fortunately, 14 guys is a lot to let our team keep protected. So we feel like we're still in pretty good shape with a relatively young core of guys who aren't, rookies, first or second year guys. We have a young core of guys who are veterans and grown ass men closing out games. And I think that's why we do a good job. Just the maturity, the understanding of roles is all there. And that's comes from our coaching staff down. But I think, in terms of which championship was a little sweeter, it's tough to the second one was awesome. It's more fresh in my mind. Like we had to battle through this worldwide pandemic, couldn't see people while we were training so that we didn't test positive or screw our team over or lose our roster spot. So there was a ton of challenges involved with that. And we came back from being down in that game to win. So the championship game, it was kind of very different from year one, but I would say you have to go with year one. It's the inaugural year of the PLL. There's 10,000 people in Philadelphia cheering. The freaking crowd was roaring the whole game. We blow a huge lead. They take the lead. We come back. We win in overtime. And we got to celebrate out in Philly. They're much better at that.
Hey, we're hoping that for this summer, that will all be back, that we'll be packing stadiums and packing bars after you guys win the championship. That is the hope here as we go into.
That's right. You better be there when we win.
Oh, yeah. As a former athlete and then in watching and talking to athletes, there's always that moment where it seems like in a game everything's clicking, everything's firing on all cylinders. When it comes to lacrosse, that's you being the face-off guy dominating at the stripe, defense and goalie holding up on their ends, and then the offense doing their thing. During that championship game, you guys got off to a slow start, but then that fourth quarter rolled around, and it seemed like that was the moment when everything just came together. Everyone talks about Zed scoring all those goals in the fourth quarter, but then I always like to bring up, who was it that won all those faceoffs and added possessions, as you did in your interview with the postgame guys? I'm looking back at him right now. When was that point, whether it was in the tournament or in that game where it was like, hey, we've got this. We're taking this thing home again this year?
I think when we realized, when it was 6-2, there might have been a TV timeout, and we're they felt like they had all the momentum, and they did. But we're like, it's only 4 goals. It's not that much, and we still have some time left in the third quarter. Let's close this quarter out strong, try to get a little bit closer, and we'll make a push in the fourth. And that's exactly what we did because they were rolling. They're a pretty efficient team on offense, and when Blaze is seeing the ball well, they're a difficult team to score on as well on that defensive end. And I think we kind of got a good bounce, and then Brad Smith was able to make a play from behind to kind of close out the third quarter, get us within 3. And following that, it was just kind of a flurry. We scored won the face-off, and Zed scored. So it was 2 quick ones, and now it's 6-5, and we feel like we're right back in the game, right? And anytime throughout a lacrosse game, you can feel it, whether it be watching and you see on the sidelines or on TV and you hear the kids yelling on the bench. Like college lacrosse is a great example of this because there's more guys. You can hear the sidelines more. You feel the tide turn, and it's really hard to like dig in, make the right play every single time when you're feeling that pressure. And it's really easy to play loose when you got that on your side. So I think once we hit that, like when it was 6-4 and we scored to make it 6-5, that's when we felt like we were back in sync again. And we didn't look back from that point. I think we continued to rattle off, 7 more from that point forward to finish 12-6, which is pretty wild.
You brought up Brad Smith. He wasn't with you guys in 2019, obviously, though, with you guys in last year's championship series. He brought so much to your team in playing midfield, playing attack, being able to go back and forth, and obviously find the back of the net for you guys a handful of times. What did a guy like him bring to the table, just in the locker room, and then when it came to the field?
I think overall, just like versatility on the field, a steady presence, a great two-handed presence, and a really smart, like fundamental and a super unselfish lacrosse player. And I think Brad does an excellent job, and his stats show this pretty clearly. He does an excellent job both scoring and feeding. So he's constantly got the respect in both regards of the defense as a scorer and a feeder. And that opens a lot of other guys up. So he's a great piece with the 2 other big-time middies we got in John Haas and Mike Chanenchuk. And obviously, when you got a guy who can play that versatile, who can distribute, who can dodge from anywhere on the field, you have a true two-way, like, Team USA midfielder in John Haas, and then the best 2-point shooter in the league in Chanenchuk. Like, that's a hard 3 to cover because they're all very, very different, right? And I think in terms of like locker room presence, Brad Smith's like your typical laid back, super chill, like funny, awesome to be around guy that, like, I don't know anyone who doesn't like him. So he's another great addition to our locker room. We're super happy. Like, that's actually just a great draft pick from Coach Staggs, knowing it's a guy whose stock probably dropped because he was hurt his senior year, but Coach Staggs knew how good he was, being someone who's super, he's known Brad since he was in high school and followed his college career. So he kind of had a little bit more intel on what type of player he would be, was confident he'd return to form and even exceed where he was in college, and he totally did that. So although he wasn't on the field in 2019, he was there for the championship game with us. Like, he got to experience that, as well as a couple other guys like Jacob Stover, our backup goalie. Same thing. He didn't play or dress for the game, but like he was on our roster and on that team in the locker room for the bubble. And like guys like that just got a feel for what we were like as a group early, which was super easy to kind of allow them to just be cohesive with all of us once we got there.
You bring up Chanenchuk and Haas, and then now we're looking at this entry draft. Chris Islanian gets added. Brian Cole gets added. Matt Abbott just got added through the waiver wire, just building up that midfield, building up that offense, and that just allows you to win more faceoffs and get to those guys and let them do the damage. Sounds like a pretty good recipe to me.
Yeah, for sure.
A faceoff specialist has only won the MVP once in professional lacrosse. It was looking like you were possibly going to make it twice last season, but that one time was Greg Gorenlian back in 2015. You were not just in that conversation, but towards the top of it. That recognition towards the faceoff position during a time where it seems like everyone is trying to get rid of the faceoff with all the new NCAA rules. But what have people been saying? I know you have your kids at the Faceoff Factory. What have people been telling you, regarding that recognition that, not just you, but the position demanded in the 2020 championship series?
I don't like to talk too much about myself in that regard. I didn't get the award, so it's like a moot point to, even discuss me and the words MVP at this point. But I do think for, kids looking up to play at the next level, them just seeing that it could be possible to be talked about as one of the best players on the field or best players, like, collectively is something that, like, that's what I aspire to do, is motivate those kids, give them a positive influence, a positive role model to look at and strive to be. And I think sometimes you get pigeonholed as a face-off guy, and I always am like a big advocate of continuing to work on your skills and try to be the most well-rounded lacrosse player you can be, because the face-off position to requires, if you're going to be super successful and be super efficient at getting your team possession, the ability to pick up like the toughest ground balls, fundamental number one, and make passes under pressure, right? Fundamental number two. So I think kids who can't do that, they don't have, like, you're really limiting your opportunities down the road. So for me to be mentioned in that conversation, obviously is super, super humbling. But what I would like the young kids like kind of seeing that to recognize is that's not just me clamping the ball and working on faceoffs. That doesn't happen by just taking faceoff reps. I do so much other stuff to prepare myself, just being a lacrosse player in terms of running, strength and conditioning, wall ball, mindset work, like all of that goes into the picture. And I think if they can realize that and recognize that if you do a lot of those things, you're going to be a better player and maybe someday get mentioned in a conversation like that. That's really my goal and hope with all this.
You've gone head to head with some of the best specialists in the world. We know, we now see a few guys joining the league from the MLO. We've definitely seen, we'll definitely see a few more here over the next couple of weeks. A pretty stellar class is coming in through the college draft. Out of all that, PLO, the new guys through the MLO, and then the new talent through the college draft. Who are we not talking about enough when it comes to the talent at the faceoff position?
So there's two guys that I'm definitely not looking forward to going against. Number one, Max Adler. He got picked up by the Chaos in round one. I think hands down, best guy that's coming over from the MLL, Kevin Reisman, being right up there as well. We actually picked him up today, which I'm super excited about. And, for training camp, him and I are buddies. We're going to get to work together, both get better and push each other and see where it goes in terms of this season. But as far as Max goes, he's an absolute animal. Him and I have, almost fist fought while we practice and train together. And then off the field, he's one of the nicest kids, my best friends. So he has that same kind of edge to the way he thinks and the way he does things. So I'm really excited to see him make a statement in the league this year. I think it's long overdue. And I can't wait to watch him play, except when it's against me. So hopefully if he wants to take a couple games off, or I know he had some dehydration issues in the ML last year. If he wants to pick a game not to hydrate for, he can save it for the Whipsnakes. But for everyone else, I'm excited to watch him kick some ass. And then another kid that I train with, and I think he's awesome, but everybody talks about him, is TD. Huge reason why I did well last summer is both him and Max. I was lucky enough, Max was working remote, so he's able to come to Boston and work. Him and I would get after it, or I would drive down to Connecticut. It's only about an hour and a half, and we would get to train all the time. And then when I was home with my parents in upstate New York, TD's right in Rochester, so only an hour and a half away. So we traded turns, playing home games and practicing. And I think he's going to be, a star from day one. I'd be shocked if those two weren't in the top 3 to 5 face-off percentage-wise, without a doubt. My bold assumption would be that both of them are going to be in the top 3.
With your name there in that top 3 as well.
We'll see.
Yeah, no, we talk a lot about TD, and obviously probably being a top pick in this college draft. I'm making the case that there's 3 teams right now that need a face-off guy, and they should be calling up the 2 teams that are at 2 and 3 that don't need a face-off guy, trying to make sure that they can secure TD. But that's just me.
Yeah,
speaking.
So where do you think he goes?
I think we see the Archers, Redwoods, or I guess not the Chaos anymore. So make it 2 teams because the Chaos just figured it out.
Listen to this. Archers and Redwoods definitely want him at 4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
What about the Water Dogs? So how do you not take them? You're a new team, right? You went 1 and 3 in group play, really 1 and 4 overall. You got the ball a decent amount, but I love Jake Withers, great kid. He's a great face-off guy. It's the same thing that happened with me when I played for Boston. I wasn't a bad face-off guy. They drafted Trevor Baptiste because he's a 70% college kid. That's business. That's pro sports. How do you pass up on the greatest kid of all time?
I know.
For someone who's not 100%. Unless you're going 100%, TD Erlin has to be in the conversation for the draft. My team included, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Straight up.
Absolutely. I think the Water Dogs, I know we've been talking a lot about the Water Dogs, and we like the situation with Jake Withers, and then we're thinking they're definitely trying to go after one of those attackmen because if this is an attack-heavy draft, obviously, as we've been seeing here through the college across season, my take, I think the Archers or the Redwoods, I don't know if the Redwoods have the capital, though, to do that, but I think the Archers make a move. I'm saying to 2 or 3.
They trade up. Yeah, you're right, because they have a little bit more wiggle room, less activity on the trade wire. I mean, if the Archers get him, they are super scary. That's been their problem. Not that, I think Stephen Kelly's great, and he's been consistently over 50%. I don't think, if you look at them going with the 2-man rotation last year. If you look at career percentages, like Kelly's better. He should have taken every face-off, in my opinion. But yeah, it's just tough. It's like all these teams in the NFL take that franchise quarterback no matter what, because that's what you should do probably, right? You don't pass up on a once-in-a-generation player.
I mean, the Cardinals took Josh Rosen. The Bears went after Mitch a little too early.
I don't know if those guys are transcendent talents. They weren't breaking the passing record in college football, but I guess it's a bigger sample size that we're working with.
I probably should have thought that one out. TD, setting records probably won't be broken. That's like they're so high, so good right now. Moving back onto the PLO and your team, we talk about all the guys that the Whipsnakes are adding, and then we'll obviously continue to add here over the next month or so. But your team lost a handful of vets this offseason. Ty Warner, Joe Lacasio, Brett Schmidt, Jeremy Sievers, just to name a few. The leadership those guys bring can't be overstated, the leadership they bring to the table. Definitely, that was a big part of both of those championship runs. What will you miss most about those guys, having them on the field, in the locker room? I know a few of them, on the field, Ty Warner being a really important piece there on faceoffs. But just in general, what are you going to miss about those guys?
Yeah, Ty was that true number one cover guy from the D-mid position, an absolute animal on ground balls. I loved playing with him. We're all going to miss him. He's on to doing different things in his life, and we're super proud of him. I think he, hopefully we get him back at some point. But I think Matt Abbott and Charlie Hayes are a great spot to start when trying to stop that gap that we lost with him. Joe Lacasio is an unbelievable locker room guy and great, well-rounded complementary midfielder to those other three I talked about. Joe could be a first-line midi on a lot of teams the way he shoots the ball, but I think he kind of has swallowed his ego from being an attack midfield, versatile guy in college, to being a dodge and move the ball midi because he draws slides. And we didn't get to see as much of his outside shooting, but he had some big goals for us. He's always getting on the board in sneaky ways. He's a really smart, smooth lacrosse player. He's my roommate, so I'm going to miss him the most. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he might not be officially retired for good.
Oh,
we'll see. Yeah, Matt Rambo's.
That's
Matt
Rambo's right there on Goal Line Extended, everybody. That's breaking news on Goal Line Extended. Joe Lacasio might not be retiring here.
Yeah, and who knows? Matt Rambo's been in his ear. He misses us, so I think he's thinking about it, honestly.
Insider, and then breaking news.
As far as Sieverts and Brett Schmidt go, those guys are awesome. They're the true adult fathers in our locker room who take care of all of us and keep us all on task. And they love to have fun just as much as we do in terms of ball busting in the locker room and fucking with each other. But those guys are great dudes who keep us super level-headed, and they step up in big times and know how to calm the group in those big moments. As you saw, Sieverts got us to the championship with that great play against the Redwoods. But Brett Schmidt was our sweet mate. So the first day we were in quarantine when we first got there, me and Lacasio are locked in our room, and we noticed there's one of those suite doors, and we're not supposed to be going with the conjoining room. We're who's in here? And it was Brett and Joe McCallion. So we popped the door open, and we felt like we were having a party with the four of us, just hanging out and watching movies and ordering food and stuff while we were locked up before our test came back. So I'll really miss him a lot. He's a great guy.
We're back in college, it seems, Joe. Back in college.
And that's exactly what it was like. Except people were doing your laundry for you in the hotel.
Oh, there we go.
Your sheets. Yeah.
Joe, I want to thank you, man, so much for joining us. The 2020 Faceoff Specialist of the Year and a two-time PLO champ, hoping to make it 3 here in 2021. Before I let you go, looking ahead to the 2021 season, simple question, what are you most excited for?
To get back on the field and get to travel to cities and play in front of fans. Our game is best when it's shared. And I love playing in front of kids, parents, everybody, inspiring other people, and, just making my family and my friends proud and getting to watch that in person. There's no experience like that. So that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Joe, appreciate you coming on the show. For everyone watching or listening, make sure to hit up Joe on Instagram and Twitter at JNards. Take it easy, my man. I hope to talk to you soon.
Ryan, you're a beast. Thanks for having me. I'll see you guys again later.
Oh, yeah. Take it easy, my man. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for our fourth show here of Goal Line Extended. I want to thank you all for watching and or listening. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube as well as on whatever podcast platform that you use. Search up Goal Line Extended, and you should find it. You can also follow Goal Line Extended on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All of the links that you will need will be in the description of this video or podcast that you are viewing or listening to. We will be back on Tuesday to react to the weekend slate of games or whatever else goes down in the world of lacrosse. So make sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss the show. I hope you all have an incredible weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GL Extended and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and online at lacrosseflash.com.